Hey everybody, it's Dana and I'm so happy to be on a friendship blog hop. You should have came to my channel from Maria's YouTube channel. So let's go ahead and get started. I am using the Bubble Words Ink Blot Spot stamp set as well as the Thank You for Being stamp set from Concord and Ninth. I'm going to use that little friend right there. And I might use the stripes, not sure. And I'm also using the Thank You for Being label dies. So let's go ahead and get started. I wanted to watercolor today. So I'm going to break out my mini Misty so I can make sure I get everything lined up correctly. I'm going to go ahead and grab just a few items or stamps from this stamp set. I want to do the really pretty hello. And I also want to do some of those little bubbles. They have a great variety of hearts and splatters in here, but I'm going to do the little bubbles. I'm just going to grab out a few of them for my project today. So the Friendship Blog Hop is just a really great hop with a whole bunch of creative people on it, and we're just sharing our love of friendship. That's exactly what this blog hop is about. So if you're about doing great things for your friends, you're going to be impressed with a lot of the cards that we have on the hop today. All right, I want to bring in that die because I just want to make sure that I have it centered in the middle of this panel. And I am going to cut down this panel later, but I just want to make sure that I get this hello exactly where I want it because I need to cut it out a little bit later with this die. So as you can see, I'm just lining up the die to make sure the hello is in there. And then I'm also going to be moving those bubbles closer to the edge of that die because even though I'm going to cut down this paper, I do want those centered or near that hello. So as you can see, I'm using odd numbers of these little bubbles today. I think odd numbers on projects just look a little bit better. And this is a brand new stamp set. So if you find out that your images are sticking to each other, just rub them gently between your fingers and you'll get some of that stickiness off of the stamps. Now, since I have them lined up the way I want, I can go ahead and close my lid, but first I need to remove the die out of the way. So I'll just gently put that off to the side and then I can go ahead and start stamping this. Now I would have to tell you, I have been in a creative slump recently. I came back from Creativation and I ended up with a terrible cold. So this card is getting me back into my creative flow, hopefully. I am still a little bit sick, not feeling my best, but I'm so happy to be part of this hop and to make a really pretty card for a dear friend of mine. I am using Memento TUXEDO black ink to stamp out these images. Now, anytime you are using watercolor paper, you want to make sure to stamp a few times because of the grain of the paper, especially if you're using cold press paper, which that's what I'm using here today. You want to make sure to stamp this a few times. Stamp that image so you know that your lines are going to be crisp. So as you can see, I'm tapping on that ink one more time and I will close my Misty lid. Now for this image, I decided to really make sure I was getting this image complete. So I actually stamped it a third time. Might not have been necessary. However, I wanted to make sure that I had the lines of this where I needed them to be because I'm going to be doing watercoloring over this. All right, so now since I have that, I'm going to also grab out some clear embossing powder at this point because I want to make sure that I seal in this ink. So I can go ahead and close that lid one more time and I'm pressing pretty firmly. Again, I want to have nice crisp lines on this. So I'm making sure to press firmly. And then as soon as I take it out of that, I'm going to take that paper immediately to that clear embossing powder. And I'm just going to actually dunk the whole card panel in there. Now, I did not use an anti-static tool on this, but I'm okay because this is just clear embossing powder. So I'm making sure to have even coverage. I'm kind of like tilting just to make sure I have that powder on there. Now, granted, you can use the Memento TUXEDO black ink without heat embossing over it. I just wanted to heat emboss this. Now, before I bring it to the paper, I am going to make sure my gun is nice and hot. I want to try to prevent as much warping as I can on this. But remember, if you do get some warping, you can always run your paper through your die cutting machine or lay something flat on top of it to get out some of that buckling you might get in your paper. And as you can see, I heat from the front and the back of this image. Now, since it's dried, I do want to tape this down to a hardboard. Again, trying to get as less bowing of that paper as I can. So I grabbed my purple tape for this. Now, I do want to give you guys a tip. Even if your paper is bowed at this point, I'm going to be adding water to this. So I'm also going to get a little bit more buckling. However, like I said, you can run this through your die cut machine and it will flatten it back out. So don't be worried if you have that bowing when you watercolor. The best thing to do though is to tape it down in advance. Now, I am using the Prima Watercolors Confections. This is the classic 12 pan set for my image today. And I'm also using my waffle flower mat. And I'm going to use a small travel size brush as well as some water off to the side. Now I wanted to do a wash on this, so I am actually going to switch up to a larger brush. This I believe was a 10-inch round because I just want to get that paper really nice and saturated with water. I'll make sure to link all the products below so you guys can see or know exactly what brushes I use for this. All right, now since I have all that water on there, I'm just going to start dropping in some colors. This is what I love about watercoloring. I love putting down the paint and watching it spread across a piece of paper. This just like gets me to my happy place. So when I knew I was going to make this card and I needed to get my mojo back, I instantly go to watercoloring. It has become a love of mine. I'm really drenching myself into this process, and to me it's very therapeutic. So as you can see, I'm just putting the colors down in rainbow order. I'm not really worried about if I have too much of one color at this point, too less of another. I just need to get the color down. And because this paper is wet and it already has that wetness to the paper, I'm able to get this color to flow. So this is what's called wet on wet technique, is adding the paint into your project with the paper already being saturated with water. This is a go-to technique that I love because, again, I love to see the color spread. So I'm going to come back in one more time and start laying down those colors again. Now, anytime you watercolor, I just need to tell you, it's going to dry back significantly. So once you put the color down, it's not going to stay this vibrant. So I like to do my watercoloring if I want the color to be really punched up. I like to do it in layers. And if you want it very, very subtle, then you just need to put down one layer. So I'm going to put that last part of that purple in, and then I'm going to clean up any areas that might have a little bit too much water with a paper towel. So you see I'm just kind of like dabbing in there, using the side of the paper towel and cleaning up those areas. I'm also going to come in with a clean wet brush and just move the rest of that color around. Now, the good thing about watercoloring is, like I said, you can build up the layers, but to me, nothing ever looks bad in watercoloring. The only time it looks bad is if you make brown. And that's by mixing your complementary colors. So just keep that in mind as well. If you mix your complementary colors, you're going to get a brown hue out of that. So again, I'm just cleaning up right around that tape so I don't have any puddles. And then I can go ahead and start heat setting this. Now that heat setting is going to set that color in, and you will see how much lighter this color is. So you can see it's not as vibrant as when the paint was wet. So like I said, I want a little bit more vibrancy. I'm not going to wet my paper this time. I'm coming directly in with that color. So this is a dry technique. I can go in and pick up those colors. The colors aren't going to move as much as they did if they were wet. So keep that in mind as well. If you're doing a dry technique, your colors aren't going to blend as easily and you're not going to see like those blooms. But I want this to be a little bit brighter than that pale backed color that we got. On that first layer, I need to punch this color up a little bit. All right, so I went ahead and heat set it, and you can definitely see how bright it is now. Now I wanted to add a little bit of gold to this, and I'm going to use my Finetec paint for this and my thin travel brush. Now I do want to color in these letters or the word. So I'm really getting a good amount of water and paint onto my paintbrush, making sure I can get that as a nice consistency. And then I'm going to go ahead and start filling in that hello. Now this hello in the stamp has like little lines to show that it's a bubble letter, but I'm not concerned about that. I can put those in a little bit later. And even if I go outside the lines, it's still okay. I can come back in with a black multi-liner and clean up that. So anytime you're painting something that's has an outline to it, if you go outside the lines with it, it's okay. You can go back and fix it with your black thin multi-liners. So I'm just going to go ahead and finish filling in this word. And as you can see, it really pops against that beautiful rainbow background. So just fill in the rest of those. And then I also need to make sure to fill in those little bubbles as well. I do want some gold to this card, and I just don't want it to be just flat color. Now you can fill in this hello with any color that you want. Totally up to you. I just prefer to add a little sparkle and gold to this. Now, since I have that part done, I wanted to add some splatter. So I moved back to that larger brush that I painted my background with, so I can get some larger splatter marks with this. So I'm just going to start tapping that on. And this is just such a fun way to add a little bit more interest to any kind of background that you do. So I'm not even at this point worried if I'm covering up some of the lines on this, because again, remember, I can go back in and fix that with that black multi-liner pen. Once again, I need to come in and heat set this back a little bit, because right now if I try to come in with the pen, it's going to smear on this. Now since I have that already dried, and look how pretty this looks once that gold is heat set in. It looks absolutely gorgeous. I can now go in and clean up those lines. So I'm going to zoom in for you guys to see this. So I have a couple multi-liner pens here. I'm just checking the thickness of both pens to see which one is as thin or thick as that line. So I'm going to go with my first one, which this is a Zig multi-liner 0.05. And I can go in now and clean up those lines that I might have gotten some of that gold paint or gold splatter over. It's easily fixable with just going back and cleaning up those areas with a multi-liner pen. The only thing I can tell you is just to try to pick one that is the same width as what you are trying to correct. Now, since I have that done, I can just clean up any of those little areas. And now remember that this stamp set had those little bubble lines, remember? So here's the stamp, and if I put it down, you can see those little lines and little dots. I can add those back in at this point using that multi-liner pen. So if you end up coloring over this and you can no longer see those lines, again, remember, it's fixable if you just go ahead and use that multi-liner pen. That is what's so awesome about this kind of line movement. It's very, very easy to go back over it. I did switch out to that thicker pen because I needed those lines to be a little bit darker and a little bit sharper. All right, now since I have all those cute little lines back in, it totally now looks like bubble letters. I'm going to make sure to go right back in over those little bubbles as well and add those little accents back in there so they just don't look like they're flat little splatters. We want them to look like they're the bubbles. All right, now since that's done, I'm going to bring this back over and look, we have the lines right back. No harm, no foul, right? Okay, now let's go ahead and get the center of this cut out. So I'm going to go and grab that die, and I'm going to place that die again right over that hello. Now this paper is dry, but I'm going to be super, super careful putting down any of this purple tape because I do not want it to rip my paper. So as you can see, I put it between my fingers and kind of tapped off the stickiness. So when I run this through, I don't risk that this is going to pull up any of that gorgeous color. And remember, anytime you're pulling back your purple tape from something that is wet, make sure to pull it back on itself. Don't tear straight up with it. Make sure you roll it back. If you tear straight up, you have a chance of ripping your paper. So just make sure to roll the tape back on itself. All right, I went ahead and die cut out this panel. And what's so cool about this die that I totally forgot about is that you also get a framelit piece with this. So as you can see, I have the top piece here that's cut out, but then I also have the little framelit part. So if you wanted to do this little framelit part in a different color, you totally could. Or if you didn't want to have it and wanted to have white space around, you can do that as well. I love this die, and I totally forgot that I did this. So this was like a happy moment for me. All right, now I want to go ahead and trim down this panel, but you can also see that that panel's flatter now because I ran it through my die cut machine. All right, I went ahead and cut that off camera, and now I need to come in and do the sentiment. So remember, I wanted to use the sentiment from the Thank You for Being stamp set from Concord & Night. And like I said, I just wanted to use that little friend. I think this friend font works very well with that bubble lettering. I just grabbed myself a piece of black cardstock, and I am going to emboss this in gold. So I'm going to grab my anti-static tool or powder bag, and then I can line up this friend. Now, if I wanted to, I could do this in white. I can do it in another color, but I wanted to bring in some more of that gold. So I'm going to pick some gold for this. Now, since I have that in the corner, I can go ahead and grab my Versamark, tap that onto the friend sentiment, and then I can go ahead and press down this lid. Now, just remember, if you forget to use your anti-static bag or you forget to add like powder or something to this, you're going to get some of those gold flakes, but that's okay because remember, I already have gold in the card. So now I can go ahead and grab my gold embossing powder. And this powder is from Ink on 3. It's my fave. I'll have it listed below. And I'll just use my little spoon and scoop some of that on there. Now, because I used the anti-static bag, I'm not seeing a lot of residue of that gold left over, so we're good to go. So now I can come in and heat set this. Again, I heat set from the front and the back. Again, this just helps the embossing powder melt easier, and then it kind of keeps some of that warping out of the paper. Now, since that's done, I did want to add a little bit more of that gold to that. So I'm going to go back in, grab that Finetec, and splatter some of that gold on there. Now, the key to splattering is always make sure you have enough water. You'll see me go ahead and try to splatter this and nothing is moving. Nothing is coming out. And that's because this is a little bit thicker, so I need to add a little bit more water. I don't want to drown this in water because this paper is not watercolor paper, but I do want to make sure I can get those flicks onto that paper. And I think that looks absolutely perfect. I would go ahead and heat set this and trim this piece down. Now we can go ahead and start building up our card. I have some Neenah Solar White cardstock. I went ahead and I trimmed down this panel, which I absolutely love how this came out. And now I can start putting everything together. I'm using the Ultra Bond glue. I love this glue and I love the fine tip applicator I have on top. This glue is a staple now on my desk. I can line that up on that white card base. And if I didn't trim down that white very accurately, I don't have to worry about it because it's on a white card panel. So just in case you end up having some of that white left over, don't worry about it. I'm going to go ahead and use that same adhesive on that little extra framelit, as I call it, piece. and go ahead and push that in. Now I did want the framelit piece just to be set in there. I'm not going to pop this up like I am the die piece itself, but I didn't want to see that white behind it. All right, now since I have that in place, I can go ahead and put on that label. Now, I wanted to add a pop of color behind this. Not necessarily a pop of color, but if you see it from the side, and I'm just grabbing some fun foam. Now, you can totally do this in white. I just grabbed this because it was a pretty color. And I'm just trimming that down just so it fits behind the panel. Not totally necessary, like I said, to use this color. It was the easiest one I can grab onto. So that's what we're going with today. Again, I'm using some of that Ultra Bond, and I'm going to go ahead and place this down on that fun foam. Now, you could use strips of tape if you want to, but because this was more of a solid piece, I decided to use the fun foam. So I can go ahead and press it in place using that wet adhesive. Gives me the opportunity to slide to make sure none of that red is peeking out from the corners. And then also using that piece of foam, everything in that back middle piece is now even. So I am going to use just a tad bit more glue here because I want to make sure that this sticks nice and good to my card. Now I can go ahead and slide that in, making sure to get right up close to the framelit part. I'm not necessarily hiding it, but I'm just putting it right back in place to where it was. Again, using wet adhesive, it allows me the opportunity to go ahead and slide this in place. And you see that little peak of red from the back, just like a little hidden pop of color. Look how pretty that looks. Oh my God, I absolutely love, love, love this card. All right, now we need to go ahead and get that sentiment. So I did trim down the sentiment, but I didn't cut the end off because I didn't know how long I wanted it. So this is just a little tip that I do because I'm lazy. I can't cut straight. So I like to just line up what I need. And at the end where I want to cut it, I just dig my nail into it. I know, straight lazy, but I cannot cut straight, you guys. And then I can bring my paper trimmer back in and then line it up and let my paper trimmer get me a good line. You know, the things that we do that many people don't know about because you never see it every day. So now since I have that straight to my card panel, I can go ahead and put this on. Now I'm just going to put some glue on the piece that's actually sitting on the hello, right on that label, because that's going to be just flat on there. To raise that end piece up, I'm just going to grab myself a tiny piece of that fun foam that I used for the background of that hello to make sure that that end piece sits up off the card and it doesn't just go flat. So that's just a good tip too. Keep those little scrap pieces and use them for your benefit. So I'll just add some more adhesive to this here and on to the other side, and then we can go ahead and put this down. I'm really loving too that my watch is matching my card. I'm just noticing that. I love that that matches. All right, everybody, that is the card today. You guys head on over to Amanda's blog, and she's going to have some friendship inspiration for you as well. Thank you guys for hanging out with me today. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you guys back here soon. Bye-bye.